Are you disappointed with homeschooling? Maybe your disappointment comes from having public school expectations as you are going through your homeschool day, and that is what we are talking about today. I'm Rebecca with the Parent Teacher Bridge. You can find the ideas and resources you need to empower you to be your child's most influential teacher. Today we're talking about homeschool parents, specifically newer homeschool parents that are trying to get the hang of how they want to conduct their school day. And as I hear people talking online, or if I talk to people in real life about their disappointment with homeschooling, much of the time it has to do with how their day-to-day activities have gone. Maybe they've tried a schedule and it didn't work out. Maybe they are trying to just overall imitate the way a teacher does things in a classroom. Homeschooling looks different than typical school days, so you need to adjust your expectations. Now, I was a teacher for 12 years, and prior to that, I grew up in the home of a teacher. So I know all about what the expectations are in a school classroom and even why those expectations are there. Much of the time it has to do with keeping order, keeping the children safe, having accountability for what each child is learning. But when you have your own children in your home with you, things just look different. You don't have to do report cards in quite the same way, because when you are doing a report card, you might be sending it off to some sort of umbrella school that just keeps things in order and in check so that you are homeschooling legally. You aren't writing down grades to show some other parent how their child is doing. In fact, you will be so surprised at how much you know about your own child's learning once you are spending more time with your child. In a school setting, I might talk all about how we line up so that we can get from one place to another in the school building and keep the children safe, and how we're not running. And while I'm not a big fan of running in my house anyway to keep my own children safe, it does look different. My children aren't necessarily raising their hands at home and waiting to be called on, for example. You might try to recreate a public school day at home and find that it just isn't working. When you're at home, you have so much flexibility. If you need to move a subject to later on in the day, you can do that. You want to mix some subjects together, you can do that too. It's fine if you are in the middle of a lesson and your child needs to go to the bathroom and they ask you, "Can I go to the bathroom?" That's fine. But conducting it in a way like they're at a school, or maybe you have them in desks. I've seen so many desks be sold online where people thought that they needed a desk, like an individual student desk, when they started homeschooling. And in the end, they found out they didn't need it. Well, the truth is that each of us has our own style of teaching. Yes, you, the parent, you have your own style of teaching, whether you realize it or not. Some of us like a little bit more structure. Some of us like to just take a hold of spontaneous, teachable moments. I read on a friend's post today how her children had helped her sort the laundry, and she was looking at the tags on where their clothing had been made. There were different locations on the tags of their clothes, and so she pulled out this atlas and the children found locations on that. If that's not your style of homeschooling, it doesn't have to be. It is perfectly okay to make a schedule, but you must remember that you will need to make adjustments. Even teachers in school make adjustments. Now, as you begin homeschooling, if you are willing to learn by making observations about your child's attitude or their strengths or their weaknesses, you are going to learn the best way that you guys work together in your own home. The experience will show you. It's amazing how many parents you talk to sometimes and they don't realize what their child knows or doesn't know because they just aren't spending as much time with them. Maybe they don't have much homework. Maybe the child doesn't need help with homework, and the parent doesn't really know what the child is learning in school. So when and if they decide to homeschool, they're spending a lot more time with their curriculum and knowing what the child is and isn't learning. you are going to learn the way that you best work with your child. The thing about homeschooling is it is so diverse. Your homeschooling day will not look like your neighbor's homeschooling day. And the homeschool day that you have now might look different a couple years from now. We all have our different situations in life, different ages of children and things like that. One way that my homeschooling has looked different than a typical school day is I just don't test as much. You need to realize that there are other ways of testing other than just giving a child a piece of paper and having them write their answers down and then grading it. You can make observations, and that's a form of a test. Like if your child is writing in their journal and you're noticing that they're not using periods or they're not using capitals or they keep writing the letter P backwards, whatever it may be, that's an observation you make. You might decide to write your observation down in some kind of notebook, or you may just make a mental note and remember, okay, that's something we're going to work on from here on out. You'll be more in tune with what your child knows and doesn't know. Now, by all means, as your child gets a little bit older, you want to get them used to the idea of taking either a paper test and or some tests online as well, just to get them more acquainted with how things might be in the workforce one day. Now, as you are learning more through your experiences of homeschooling, keep an open mind to be flexible. After all, your primary goal is to keep your child learning. Believe it or not, your primary goal is not to get your child in a bad mood and not to get you upset. Your primary goal is keep your child learning. So sometimes you might want to stop every now and then and reflect. What have we learned? We didn't get everything done that I had down in my book to get finished. Things came up, errands came up, emergencies came up, different things. People outside of my home needed me for favors to help out with something, and our school got neglected. Keep in mind, your main goal is to keep your child learning. So you may have to reflect on that and think, oh, well, they did learn this today when we were out and about driving. You also need to give yourself time to adjust. For some people, that might take an entire year. Some of us learn quicker than others. It could take a few weeks for you to find a routine that works, and then you may need to adjust some things about that routine. You might find out that your children work better in the afternoon than they do in the morning. You might find out that you can do some subjects with all your children at once, and you may find out you need to give one child some kind of mental break or playtime while you work more one-on-one with another child. Remember, it is okay to start simple and to ease in on things. Don't think you're trying to make it just like a public school day where you have 7 classes and you're switching all those classes. It's okay for the first couple of weeks to just start with something as simple as reading. Find out where your child is on their reading level. Are they understanding what they are reading? Are they making some errors that you need to fix? And then you can add on another subject as your child gets more into a routine. You have so much flexibility. Why not try it and use that? If you know things aren't going to be perfect anyway, then just go ahead and start. You can always customize things down the road. Now, this one I hear a lot. But what if I'm not a teacher? I hear that one all the time. Well, first of all, you need to watch my Homeschool Pep Talk. I'll include a link for that in the description below. You have actually taught your child more than you think. You've been teaching them since they came to you at birth or whenever they came to you, okay? And they learn so much just by watching your example. And you need to realize that just because a teacher has a certificate and just because a teacher has experience teaching children in school, it doesn't make them perfect. They have to learn, they have to make adjustments along the way too. Be prepared to learn alongside your child, especially if you're nervous about teaching your child some harder subjects. Did you know it's okay when you're first trying out homeschool to start with just one subject? Maybe you start with only reading. Maybe you know your child is a great reader and you want to start with math just to figure out what gaps you have to fill or how best to challenge your child. You can always add on other subjects later. You don't have to ring a bell and do everything like you experienced school when you were growing up. because after all, the main goal is to keep your child learning, and it doesn't have to be one set way to keep your child learning. Make priorities in your homeschool. Chances are you have a reason why you are choosing to homeschool. That might be because your child is suffering in an academic area and you need to find out how best to help your child. If that's the case, prioritize that subject area. Look at reviews, ask other homeschool parents about what is the best curriculum for that subject area that you could try to help out your child. You might choose to spend more money in that area because it's so needed for you and your child personally. You might have a priority of building a relationship with your child. Maybe your family's gone through a lot of struggles. Maybe the child has experienced bullying in school and you want to build your relationship together. That can be a priority, especially if your child is doing okay academically anyway. All of it is part of learning, and relationships matter too. Make goals and look at them often. Now, I have 3 children. This year they were grades 6, 2nd, and kindergarten. And each year as I start my school year, I have some large goals for each of my children. For example, my 2nd grader, I wanted him to learn to work on some of his speech a bit more. And I wanted him to work on his writing some more. He was writing some letters backwards. I wanted him to get better at sentence writing and so on. So it's okay to have some goals, just a few, 4 or 5 for each child, and write them down so that you can go back and look at them often. If it's an older child, your goal might be you want that child to work more independently through their textbooks or their online studies. And if that's the case, you go back and look at those goals. It lets you know when you look at them how far you have come in reaching those goals. Because like I said earlier, if you have a crazy day and you didn't get everything done that day that you had written down in your little planner, you might feel like a failure. But if you revisit the goals that you originally had for your child, you can see just how far you have come and feel a little bit better about the idea of homeschooling. And finally, I've said this before, but expect change and be flexible. Just because you need to adjust something or change something does not mean that you were doing a poor job. It just might mean something like your situation has changed. You're raising your child one day to be a successful and productive citizen, to one day be able to own a business or work a job, to be able to provide for their family and to live a successful life. Keep that into perspective. Notice your child's strengths and work toward those. Any weaknesses your child has, provide a little bit of extra support there. Stress and frustration are not conducive to learning. So if you feel yourself starting to get stressed out, take a breather. You can always allow your child to go have a mental break for a little while. Go back and revisit those goals, read a book, and come back with a fresh mindset. You are your child's most influential teacher.